Well, good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and over the last number of years, I had a pleasure to host this channel of live webcasts where we are bringing to you the latest thought leadership, but also showcasing technology executives and leaders, allowing them to tell their stories to our technology leadership audiences and enterprise tech enthusiasts. Today, on this May 1st, 2024, I'm thrilled to welcome you to our final sixth episode in our Deloitte Tech Trends 2024 series of live webcasts. Today, we're going to talk about the final sixth of our tech trends for 2024, focused on core modernization. Now, before we go into the topic, I would like to remind the audience that this is a live session. So, first of all, please bear with us for any technical difficulties we might have. But second, of course, this gives you an opportunity to engage with our panelists directly. So, if you have any questions, any comments, you feature of this Zoom platform, please feel free to submit your questions. The session is also recorded, so we will be sending the link afterwards, both to you individually, you who registered for the session, but also on LinkedIn. And if you would like to share it with your friends and colleagues, please, of course, we encourage you to do so. Well, let's start. I'm really thrilled to be joined by three of my best friends and colleagues who are going to help us unpack this important trend. First, I would like to welcome Zillah Austin. Zillah is a partner at Deloitte. Hello, Zillah. Thank you very much for your time. Zillah is a partner at Deloitte and one of our leaders of Deloitte's technology strategy and business transformation practice. Also joining us is Diana Kearns-Manolatos. Diana leads Deloitte's global tech transformation research, and she'll be able to share with us some actual data, some evidence-based numbers and figures to sort of demonstrate and strengthen the point we would like to make. And last but certainly not least, Vasa Vishveshwara, who is Deloitte's Cloud Chief Technology Officer. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And given that this session is part of the Deloitte Tech Trends Deep Dives, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a couple of minutes to just provide the context of tech trends, what they are, and then we are going to come to the final tech trend, and then I'll pass it on to our panelists to share sort of their perspective. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Diana, I'm going to look to you. Can you see the screen? Awesome. Awesome. Wonderful. So, for those of you who are returning to this program, you would have heard that we used this channel to showcase Deloitte Tech Trends every year. And Deloitte Tech Trends, we've been at this for 15 years now. So this has been going on for quite a while. The ongoing research continues every year, where we are actually interviewing and engaging with thousands of clients around the world to help identify and source what are those leading organizations investing in, what are the leading organizations thinking, and we are sourcing those relevant, timely types of investments that we believe are going to be relevant and important for all organizations within the next 18 to 24-month window. So these technology trends are focused on enterprise technology and are focused on those real cases where leading organizations are already making the moves that we believe will be relevant to everybody, and then bringing them to you as both entertainment and education. Another unique thing about Deloitte Tech Trends is that it is freely available to everyone to download. So by a simple Google search of Deloitte Tech Trends, you'll be able to access our portal, download all of the materials, all of the client use cases, all of the stories, not just Tech Trends 2024, but all of them historically. Now, as we've been doing this for a number of years, there was an interesting observation. The observation is that the innovations and trends that we talk about are not really random brilliance ideas. Instead, they all seem to be connected. And when we spend a little bit more time thinking about how they are connected, what we realized is that all of the technology innovation across the history of technology and IT, which actually goes back 175 years, is actually a steady progress along three common paths. We call them eternities. The path around the interaction between humans and machines, where we could see the progress from that interaction through, punch cards 75 years ago to command line interfaces, graphical user interfaces, and so on and so forth. So the path of interaction, the path of information, and innovations that are advancing the innovation eternity, from basic arithmetic calculations through relationship databases, descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and now AI, and innovation along the computation front. So these three eternities seem to be the context that allows us to put all of these invention and innovation in their proper place. So what are we observing? These three paths have clear end games. And on the interaction front, it seems that all the invention that we are experiencing now, invention around how we as humans interact with machines, is ultimately leading us to a simplification, to simplicity. And while the technology underneath is increasingly more complex, the actual outcome we are after is the simplicity of that interaction. Similarly, on the information front, all of the inventions, all of the emerging technology trends are actually leading us towards greater intelligence. So the end game of the information path is greater increased intelligence. And lastly, the third eternity on computation, actually is taking us towards the end game of abundance of compute. So simplicity, intelligence, abundance. Now, this will always win, of course, doing smarter, doing faster, doing better if you're a startup. But our clients are not only startups. Our clients are mostly actually going concerns. And in that sense, we also needed to recognize that all of organizations, in addition to thinking about smarter, faster, and better, also have to take care of those foundational aspects of running enterprise IT. And therefore, in our tech trends model, we've also introduced what we call grounding forces, of which there are three: business of technology, so just a good practice of running a good IT organization, good IT shop; cyber and trust, which is distinct and very, very critical these days; and also core modernization, in recognition that all of the cool technologies, all of the investments we are making now, we are actually setting ourselves up for the next generational core modernization. So from that perspective, our tech trends has adopted this framework where we respect that there are six domains within which enterprise technology innovation occurs. And this is how we are capturing tech trends. And therefore, in 2024, in our Tech Trends 2024, we have captured what we believe are the most impactful, important trends within each one of these six domains, to give you a full, comprehensive picture of tech trends that impact enterprises. Therefore, on the interaction front, interaction between humans and machines, this year we spoke about interfaces in new places, how spatial computing and industrial metaverse is actually showing up now in real client use cases. On the information front, no surprise, the word of this year was generative AI. So we spoke about Gen AI, but as a platform for business growth, as we observe that leading organizations have already looked at using Gen AI for optimization and productivity, and are now thinking about the actual business value, added value of Gen AI. And on the computation front, we were talking about organizations who are thinking about re-leveraging investments they already have, including IT, OT, and edge computing to further sort of accelerate their computational power. On the grounding forces front, this year we spoke about DevX, as in developers' experience, as part of the trend around running business of technology. This was a very interesting trend because it actually is not a technology trend, but it's rather people trend. It's figuring out how leading organizations are creating conducive environments to keep their best IT talents engaged, motivated, and enabled to create value. On the cyber and trust front, we spoke about synthetic data and defending reality. The synthetic media that is now having ability to create deep fakes to the point where to distinguish whether something is real or not real, and how technology is emerging to help us deal with those deep fakes. In other words, math versus math in this continuous spy versus spy game. And today, we are going to wrap up Tech Trends 2024 by focusing on our sixth trend in the domain of core modernization, the trend we call core workout. And I'm going to invite Zillah to tell us a little bit more about this particular trend. So Zillah, over to you.
Thank you, Dalibor. Really do appreciate it. And it's very nice being with you all today. So we're talking about tech debt and moving from tech debt to tech wellness. And this is really about the shifting approach for addressing your technology debt and broadening the idea that your core systems need to be modernized. For those of you who aren't familiar with what tech debt is really about the implied cost of not modernizing your systems and working with suboptimal performance. In today's day and age, we find that businesses need to be dealing with aging technology that can't keep up. Whether your organization is going through significant growth, perhaps you've gone through some mergers, acquisitions, or divestitures, the technology platform that hasn't been able to grow with the organization. Often we find that companies are going through reliability, extensibility, and scalability challenges. Perhaps they'd like to move into new markets, improve customer interactions, but the technology can't support it. We often see performance issues, so particularly with aging systems and legacy networks, perhaps it's not running as fast as you would like it, or you're unable to achieve the effective level of performance that your organization needs. There's security issues. New security vulnerabilities come up on a regular basis, and we often find that the aging and legacy technology results in perhaps out-of-package maintenance or some of those mainframes that are obsolete across the board. We like to see new technology being adopted, and that's certainly a stage where organizations want to take advantage of 5G, perhaps Wi-Fi 6. Maybe for those of you who have not yet moved to the cloud or want to go on the path of moving to the cloud, you're still working through the data centers that need to be shifted to the cloud. Dalibor said the magic word a little bit earlier about Gen AI, and Gen AI is also another important driver for addressing technical debt. We often see that data management needs to be cleaned up in order to be able to take advantage of generative AI. And last but not least, enterprise resource planning. ERP platforms, we often see that there's new versions of these technologies, and perhaps your existing ERP platforms are a little older. Maybe they haven't kept up with the significant upgrades that are required across the board. So if you think about tech debt, it can really be classified into three main categories as to why tech debt has occurred. There's malfeasance, misfeasance, and non-feasance. So malfeasance, this is about 2% of tech debt. So this is really things like poor coding, maybe incorrectly designed programs of technology, maybe it's not being executed well. Misfeasance, so this is really about 95% of technology debt. You were using the right technology, the right code that was justified in the moment to meet the business needs, but perhaps it wasn't implemented quite as perfectly as you wanted, and it was always going to be cleaned up later, and later sometimes never comes. or nonfeasance. That's the third area, which is about 3% of technology debt. So this was the most elegant way to solve your business need. You use the latest programming, but unfortunately that particular programming and that approach has now changed and evolved with the times. So until now, companies have really been monitoring what their technical debt is, and they've been thinking about that through a series of piecemeal assessments. So stopping and going, okay, well, we know that we need to be able to address things, and we're really only looking at one piece at a time. But really, if you want to be a leader in the future, organizations have to take a continuous and holistic approach of actually thinking about your technology debt and a view of your core. So instead of letting that technology debt accumulate and overwhelm you, overwhelm your systems, you need to start reframing to technical wellness, which is really about thinking and providing guidance on which technology upgrades matter, when do you want to do them, and why do you want to make them. And this is the planning of your overall technology approach. So the smartest way to invest in your modernization is really taking a regular systematic assessment of your company's needs, your strengths, certainly budget across your key areas of modernization spending, and thinking about identifying and prioritizing what needs to change, and then the treatment of that within your organization. We often find completing a core checkup, so similar to like an annual exam at the physician, you need to be thinking about your 5 key areas of the core. So let me go through each one of those 5 areas. It's infrastructure, data, applications, your workforce and your talent, and then cyber. So they're 5 main areas to think about. So the first one is infrastructure. This is an area which is broadest and often the most expensive to make the changes in. Lots of the core checkups should include things like your mainframes, your servers, your end user compute. You need to be thinking about how do you actually move that to the cloud? What are some of the things that you need to be thinking about? Your aging fiber, maybe your LAN environment, your WAN environment. Perhaps you want to take advantage of 5G, Wi-Fi 6, satellite communications, but really upgrading to these capabilities. Certainly take advantage of your private networks, your advanced in software-defined networking, and other advancements that you can have across the board. We've seen a lot of activity in this area over the last 5 or so years. A lot of organizations have taken advantage of cloud modernization. One of those examples has really been the state of Utah. So the state of Utah had a recovery services, which was a very 25-year-old COBOL mainframe system, and they needed to move that and actually improve their overall technology landscape. So the agency decided to move to the cloud. They used what's called an automated refactoring tool to modernize their mainframe. This was something that they did over an 18-month project, and they were able to eliminate their technology debt and prepare their infrastructure to stay healthy over a period of time. This has certainly been really important for them as they've been thinking about how to stay fresh with their state and local legislation, keeping up with the federal mandates, plus also thinking about the security requirements that actually happen throughout. The second area is data. So thinking about your core checkup across the entire life cycle of data, plus also thinking about data storage as well. Your data storage can be modernized with your cloud systems. It can also enable real-time data. Organizations need to be thinking about, are you going to use data stores, data lakes, data drives, etc. There's a lot of thought process around the cost and complexity of maintaining your data. It's also, as I mentioned a little earlier, quite important to think about data as your overall plan towards moving to Gen AI is a critical component here. We've seen from Amazon Web Services, we had an interview with Mindy Ferguson, who's a Vice President at Amazon Web Services. She talked extensively about building a streaming data pipelines that actually enable you to have real-time access and rapid communication with your connected devices. Streaming data and real-time analytics certainly become a core technology for businesses, and it definitely plays a larger role in organizations' AI goals. The next area is around applications. So applications is A key area of technology debt, we see that all the time. Organizations who've had large custom applications, perhaps package applications that haven't moved to SaaS solutions. A lot of our ERP platforms are moving to SaaS applications, and that's been modernizing over time as well. So you need to be thinking about, do you do these all at once or as a series of projects over multiple years? And many organizations take the latter approach, primarily due to budget constraints. And they think about how and when to best move your technology applications over to cloud-based technology platforms, and certainly put you on a path for regular modernization and on the path to upgrades, which I think is also a key component to think about your technology applications. This is an area of pretty high risk for most organizations. Organizations tend to think about, I need to make the move to modernize my applications, but I have to think about, can I actually continue to run the business and operate effectively throughout, and how to make that move over a period of time. The third area is the workforce and talent. And this one has been a key driver for improving technology debt across the board. So as part of your core checkup, you need to be considering modern engineering experiences. So this is thinking about the tools, process, the culture, and the impact of how you're going to be able to acquire and retain your best technology teams. It's also thinking about whether or not your organization is actually ready for the modernization effort. So we see across the board that those aging technology platforms often have skill sets that are really hard to find. So for example, in the state of Utah you had COBOL developers, and finding COBOL developers is actually really hard to find. In fact, my mother did COBOL development back in the day, and that's quite some time ago.
Wow.
Finding individuals who can actually have that skill set, it's much harder to find. They're not teaching COBOL at universities these days. The next area is around cyber and risk, and trust as well. I think trust is also thrown in there as well. So when you think about cyber and risk, there are a lot of considerations around security and privacy, regulatory requirements, ethics, obviously monitoring ethics. Health has been another component that's come up in the last few years. So thinking about how your technology has a potential harm on society. We're also seeing a lot of additional regulatory compliance that has to be improved through cybersecurity automation. How you developed things many years ago does not necessarily mean that you are immune to some of the cybersecurity attacks that are happening across the board, and it has to be a key component to keep your environment safe and secure. So all of the areas that you think through in terms of the 5 key areas of reducing tech debt, that's certainly an aspect around thinking about how do you actually make sure that you're achieving financial and intangible benefits across the board. So your financial ones, what we've seen is that organizations who have gone and actively reduced and planned for managing their tech debt have been able to achieve 50% faster delivery to the business. And that's critical. Most organizations need to be able to have technology as a basis that they can serve customers better, deliver services across the board. It's certainly something that is a critical component and achieves financial success for your organization. But also intangibly. So systematically tracking your technical debt helps organizations to prioritize your investments rather than trying to keep up with what we call as random acts of modernization, which is something that we see in a large number of organizations. Technical debt is not bad. You will always have technical debt. But what we really think is important is taking a tech wellness approach, which means that you are regularly evaluating some of those key core areas of your modernization, working out what are the costs, what are the risks, what's your readiness to be able to make those investments, and understanding which of those technology upgrades matter, when to make them, and why you want to make them. So across the board, we see technology debt to technology wellness is really a reframing of how you're actually planning and thinking through your overall technology wellness program. So with that, I know some of you probably have a whole range of questions. I do want to mention that you can put any questions into the Q&A at the bottom. So there's a little chat screen on Zoom that you can actually type in the Q&A. We will certainly address those questions. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Diana, who can tell you a little bit about some of the amazing statistics with our tech debt and how we're able to improve it over time.
Thanks, Zillah. Appreciate it. And just reiterating, do put your questions into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Just to share some of the data out there to broaden this to what's going on in the market, whether they're ERP systems or mainframes or data centers, we know that there are technologies that are really latent with that technical debt that are slowing organizations down. Some stats for you. Technical debt, it's a $1.5 trillion issue as of 2022 data. We know that engineers are currently spending about a third of their time addressing technical debt. So it's a costly problem. It's a time-consuming problem. And it's standing in the way of value. 70% of technology leaders view technical debt as a hindrance to their organization's ability to innovate and as the #1 cause of productivity loss. Deloitte did a study on mapping digital transformation value, which I've been out there talking about. And what we found is that 2 out of 3, 66% of organizations say that their legacy systems are standing in the way of successful digital transformations. So we know it's a problem. And to move forward, leaders can look for smarter ways to invest in modernization. And I think that's what we're really here talking about today, is looking at how we can address some of the systemic aspects of the core that need to be modernized that are holding organizations back. And so I think it's important to note that digital transformation doesn't always require net new products and platforms, that looking at just the dozen or so applications that have a handful of issues, those may be what's driving the bulk of the impact around outdated systems. So I think #1 message here is determine what's holding you back. As Hilla very artfully described, technical debt comes in many forms. It could be your software, it could be your code, it could be your infrastructure. And that is where the opportunity cost is. I want to use my time to focus on 2 issues and hopefully, give you some data as food for thought, and then also recommend some actionable strategies related to those 2 particular areas. So I think one that comes up very often on the issue of technical debt and core IT modernization is ERP.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my role as our global and US technology transformation research leader within the Center for Integrated Research, looking at what's going on across all different industries, I have some data up here looking at the true opportunity and bottom line cost that organizations are facing related to ERP modernization. And what this data is, we did a stock price returns analysis looking at over 700 companies who are investing in ERP modernization and their quarter-over-quarter stock returns. So real companies, real financial data. And what we see and what we know is often ERP modernization is the backbone of many businesses' core IT. And while market sentiment is lukewarm, we did a whole separate sentiment analysis that showed 69% of companies are either negative or neutral in terms of how they're thinking about ERP. When organizations invest in ERP modernization, their stock price performs above 3-year performance averages. And so again, this is looking at 700 large listed companies actually investing in ERP modernization quarter over quarter, that they are outperforming the market in terms of their 3-year performance. But what you can also see from this data is that Q8 is critical. And so, ERP modernization, there's a reason why the market sentiment is negative. These are often very long programs that require a lot of investment, a lot of time, that there is risk involved in them, all of the same points that Hilla was bringing up. And so being able to connect the ERP modernization to the larger business strategy, the larger IT modernization goals, how you're looking to innovate and bring that data into the business, bring the ERP into the cloud, leverage some of the innovation trends related to Gen AI, which is absolutely dependent on a strong data platform and core infrastructure. And getting past that dip that you see in our slide here, that critical 2-year dip where people tend to move away from their business case because it's just becoming a slog. That getting past that quarter 8 is where organizations really start to see in quarters 9, 10, and on returns from those investments. So ERP is one thing that I really wanted to highlight, the importance of thinking about how you modernize your ERP in order to achieve all of the innovation objectives that organizations are trying to achieve today. The second one that I wanted to highlight is mainframe modernization. And so this is one area where, I mean, we spoke already a bit about COBOL and how those skills are not being taught in university right now. And there are 3 big market shifts that I wanted to highlight going on with mainframe modernization, where, you know, this should really be a focus for organizations right now because of these 3 shifts. So one is foundational vendor shifts, making the cost of doing nothing go up related to mainframes. What we're seeing is that given some recent M&A activity, it's raising the cost of mainframe licenses by 4 to 6x. And so, you know, year over year, this has just been a line item on the balance sheet of we're just going to do nothing and keep our mainframes. And so doing nothing is coming with a cost. The second trend related to mainframe modernization, which Vasa, I'm sure we'll be talking about, is cloud and cloud maturity. We've now come to a point where the early and even the fast followers of cloud, that cloud tech is entering its 3rd decade of maturity. And so it really is time to get off of the mainframes and move over to the cloud now. The technology is very mature, and those legacy constraints really just, there's too much pressure on businesses. And then the third trend is really this allure of AI. As I mentioned with ERP, if ERPs are an issue, mainframes are a crisis. You can't fully harness the power of AI if you're still on a mainframe. And so in terms of making this actionable, it's really about strong engineering capabilities. And there are 3 approaches I want to quickly mention that we see organizations taking related to mainframe modernization that are very successful in helping address this issue. So one is a one-to-one approach where they're creating test cases that line up with one-to-one functionality. Mm-hmm. And so this approach is very interesting because it doesn't require that mainframe wizard to have the institutional knowledge. You can build functional test cases to really see the way that your new performance environment is going to operate as you move workloads off of the mainframe and into that new environment, and to do so with confidence, without understanding necessarily the black box of what's happening on the mainframe. The second approach is more of a business-driven approach. And so, for example, with one top-tier organization, we've worked with them to bring together multiple different capabilities and then use tools to identify what business processes are being touched and follow and trace that through the organization to understand dependencies. And then the third approach is really organizations that are using AI to translate from COBOL into plain English or trace data and logic throughout the system with the aid of AI in order to go cloud native. And so maybe I'll stop there since I've mentioned cloud a few times and see if I can hand it over to Vasa to talk a little bit about the cloud opportunity, which is huge here.
Yep, thank you, Diana. So I want to talk about how the technical debt is creating the risk and losing the opportunities in the age of cloud. So one is around time to market. if you have too much legacy systems and too much technical debt where you haven't revamped your system, then you are not taking advantage of the new business requests that are coming through where you're unable to respond. So I have a good example with in the same sector. I have two customers where one customer continuously remove the tech debt and stay up to date, where they were able to bring new solutions to the market very quickly and
Mhm.
capture the market and drive the growth of the business. The other, they are still struggling because they are behind on their technical debt, continues to do patching of these old systems, and their timeline to bring any new idea is very larger. So a clear indication that having a large technical debt is going to impact your business directly with your go-to market, um, the new solutions.
Mhm.
The second one, we already touched on the Gen AI space, is ability to take advantage of new innovations. Now, Gen AI helps in both ways. Is you can leverage Gen AI toolset to modernize some of these applications into the cloud or into the new tech stack. It's pretty powerful, and the recent studies showing us that with the Gen AI, I can modernize the applications 30 to 40% faster, right? So that's it, it's giving you the new tool set. The second one is with the Gen AI, the innovation is changing so fast that if you're unable to remove the tech debt and take advantage of the new tool set, then even with the Gen AI, you want to roll out a new feature set, you are left behind in the same sector compared to your peers. So these two are a very critical component for you to sustain your business in this new world. From the Gen AI, you probably heard about this. If a new idea comes to you and if you're ready to roll out, then great. But if not, there are other competitors who can build applications very quickly and then capture the market, right? So these two are very critical. One solution that I saw really worked well with one of the enterprise is they have their technical debt budget every year.
Mhm. Mhm.
It ranges from 2 to 10% of their budget, depending on the type of the tech debt they were planning to do. And with that, what is happening is every year, because of this budget lockdown, they were able to prioritize the things that they want to improve upon, which is keeping them up to date. So I think I felt like that's really worked well. And they were early on moved to the cloud as well because they saw the advantages of the cloud and having the budget locked in. It's not about, oh, should I do it or not? Rather, they immediately, took the cloud as the priority and moved some of the new applications into the cloud. And now their go to market is much faster. So with that, I think, we can hand over to Q&A.
Yeah, this is so this is actually quite insightful what I heard so far. And maybe just extract a couple of highlights for me. First, Zillah, I loved how you described that tech debt actually touches 5 specific areas. I think that when people think tech debt, they immediately revert to the likes of mainframe. That's an obvious one, right? But tech debt is in infrastructure. Tech debt is in data. Tech debt is in your applications. But brilliantly, tech debt is also in workforce, in talent, as well as in cyber. So there are 5 domains of tech debt. I think this is really important to help sort of open up the aperture of what people are thinking about. What I really loved, Diana, what you mentioned is that we now have evidence that organizations that are intentionally addressing and investing in modernization of that technology, you used an ERP as an example, actually put better financial results on the books, right? As long as, of course, that project goes well. But by the way, we know the secret recipe for that too, right? That for these transformations to go well, there has to be a clear strategy, tech investment aligned to that strategy, and capacity to change which is the most critical aspect. And when these three things come together, then good news are possible. But you said it's typically a 3-year journey, with sort of quarter 8 being critical. But what I think is really important for all the audience members to hear is that we actually are able to demonstrate how continuous investment in modernization of technology actually results in positive financial results of an average corporation. And then I also loved what you said, Vasa, that there are two sort of compelling reasons we see organizations who do this well achieve. Speed to market being number one, speed to market. So those who are continuously able to keep up dealing with the tech debt, they enable themselves to be faster to market, and they set themselves up to be maybe more nimble, more malleable, more agile in adoption of new technologies that particular tech debt would prevent them from doing, right? This is really, really very, very, very good. Now, the last point that you made, I think, was a masterstroke, that you are sharing sort of the leading organizations who do this really well are parking between 2 and 10% of their budget on tech debt. And to me, that last point is the essence of the trend we are observing here, that this is not about anymore big bets on doing massive projects once every 5 years and then suffering the recovery period of few years before we re-embark on another major surgical operation. But instead, what we are seeing is that leading organizations are adopting the philosophy of continuous modernization. I'm going to assume over these 5 domains: infrastructure, data, apps, people, and cyber, right? So the thinking here is evolving, I think, very rapidly, and leading organizations are approaching it truly as a workout, as opposed to surgical interventions needed. Number of questions coming through the audience. I'm gonna sort of pick them up, and please ask. Please feel free to respond. Question number 1, are there any tools or templates? Like, how do we actually measure tech debt? Is anyone able to answer that question? How would an organization approach measuring to what degree are they indebted in that sense?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at it.
Please.
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways you can measure the tech debt based on the maturity of your organization. So one, I will give you the simplest one, the time to market. Your business team comes to you and says that they want to release a new feature set. Now, the feature set, the capability that you want to release is how long does it take from end to end, not just coding part of it, not just testing part of it, but end-to-end release of the feature set. And if the feature set takes more than 3 months, again, depending on the complexity, depending on how big is the idea is, then that is your measurement. That's your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, you plan to increase. Okay, now this year, a similar feature set took 3 months to release it. And in the next year or next iteration, can I get faster in a month? Right? So this is one way of measuring your tech debt. Now, this is as we talked about the 5 areas that you were talking about. Each one has a different tools and metrics that we have to capture it and then continues to improve it. Another good example is the data. You probably talking about how do we extract intelligence from the data set. Now, if you think about large enterprises, just getting access to data or moving the data takes weeks and months. Now with a cloud, I can be able to quickly analyze the data and produce the results within days, within hours, right? So this is another way, like from the data standpoint, how fast can you analyze the data? How fast can you re-architecture the data so that you are taking advantage of the intelligence which is already incorporated to it?
Mm-hmm.
So we can go into the details in one of the sessions about how do we capture it, how do we measure it, and then how do we continuously improve the tech debt.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. Now, follow-on question just came through about this concept of continuous modernization. The question is there a particular operating model adjustment needed within the IT organization itself? Like, are there modernization SWAT teams? Is there an agile dedicated team? Any reflections on how leading organizations are actually approaching this concept of continuous modernization?
Yep, no, very good question. So from the modernization perspective, depending on how you're organized, your development teams or product teams, if they're if the organization is structured already way into product teams where each team is delivering a product feature set, then every year, as I mentioned, some percentage of the capacity is allocated for modernization. You release a new feature set last year that requires a modernization, whether to migrate to new data set or new databases, or going from SQL to NoSQL, or going from high performance databases. Some of this capacity of the product as part of the product enhancements is incorporated. So if your structure is product teams, then that's a very streamlined process.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have the product teams, the way I saw a couple of enterprises doing is allocating the budget and then enhancing the capability of the current teams that they are producing and maintaining it. So for example, if you have like a 20-member team maintaining your integration platform, let's say. Now, following year, because the budget is locked, you can go from 20 members to 30-member team, upgrade the the integration platform, and then go back to your regular 20-member team. So this is one way of thinking about increasing the capacity of the teams through the elasticity, and then moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another approach I saw worked very well, and keeping up to date with your integrations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. There was another question that came about the budget that is being parked for modernization, 2 to 10%. It says that implies that tech debt has been significantly reduced. I'm going to assume what this gentleman is saying is that it probably takes a much more significant investment to get us to a point where we can start doing ongoing continuous investment. Is that how we should interpret this?
So the way it depends on the maturity, right? If you have a long legacy of tech debt, 10% may not be enough, right? If you want to completely modernize ERP and mainframe, that itself takes a lot of budget depending on your total budget you have. But if you have a continuous tech debt remediation every year, then you should be able to capture it based on the latest trends and technology improvements. And one more thing I want to highlight, right? I'm not a big fan of going to the new tech stack which doesn't have business value, right? That doesn't make any sense. If I'm spending $1 million on an innovation, but it's not giving me $1 million plus of business value, then that migration may not be worth it. It's actually business value losing, right? You are latest technology, but you are you're not profitable. So the tech debt needs to be evaluated and prioritized according to the business value. Then you within the 2 to 10% range should be palatable for any enterprise. But that doesn't mean that, oh, I'm up to speed. No, you're not.
Yeah.
One thing to consider in terms of the cost of tech debt is that you're also still accumulating tech debt while you're also trying to eliminate tech debt.
Yeah.
Plus also your organization's changing. It's consistently changing across the board. It's quite difficult to sort of say our technical debt is this today. Your technical debt is relative to what your business actually wants to be achieving, and that constantly is modifying as well. So just something to think about.
That's a great clarification. We actually had a question that was attempting to answer this exact question on, like, is technical debt, therefore, should we think of technical debt as the amount of efficiency, such as speed to do something, that we are actually missing out on because we are indebted. Is that a way to position it to, somebody somewhere needs to agree to fund investments that are significant. So is that the way to position it well with business leaders who need to be educated and encouraged to provide funding? Is that any reflections on that?
Yeah, that is certainly the way to be thinking about it, but also you're thinking about the technology appropriateness to enable the business value. So that's really, and you need to be thinking about that across all of your applications, all of your environments, your data, etc. You need to really sort of take a big step back and think about how appropriate is this particular application or technology relative to what I'm trying to do with it. And a lot of organizations will go through, particularly in the area of applications, a series of sort of what's called the 4Rs, if anyone's familiar with the 4Rs. And it's really a way to sort of classify business value sort of from low to high, and thinking about the technology condition of your applications, for example, from low to high, and starting to really spend a bit of time evaluating where exactly are your applications in that particular spectrum. And based on that, you start to think about, well, do you need to be replacing or retiring those applications? Do you need to be perhaps re-platforming, particularly re-platforming in the areas where you know you've got high business value, but maybe the technical condition isn't great? Or conversely, your technical condition is great, but your business value is really low, so maybe you want to redesign those particular applications. And then the last area that's really important is sort of thinking about high business value, high technical condition. They're the ones that you want to be retaining. It's not uncommon for most organizations to sort of take a big step back and think about strategy, your technology strategy, and thinking about looking at your entire application landscape. We spend a lot of time going through and going, okay, we've got 2,000 plus applications in our environment, for example. How do we think about and use a mechanism to classify those particular applications, and then have a target of where do we need to re-platform, where do we need to replace, or where do we need to redesign those applications, and thinking about it in a more systematic way.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you'd actually plan that out over a period of time. No organization anywhere in the world will have enough money to be able to do everything all at once. And quite honestly, there is no such thing as ultimate nirvana here. You are going on a journey, and you're sort of thinking about how do you actually take the right steps on the journey.
Thank you very much for that, Zillah. There's a follow-on question to Vasa on the. I think that you triggered a lot of people with that sort of 10%. This is very interesting. So here's a question. It's a logical question. Like, if you adopt this philosophy of continuous modernization, then should the budget eventually be lowering down or not? So it's an I have a perspective, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, no, I think as long as the business value continues to add up, right? Then the idea is that I'm not spending the same amount of money on tech debt this year versus next year. But the caveat is the technology continues to change. Now, I go from version 1 to version 10 in a few years, right? If there is a business value, then the tech debt makes sense. But if there is no business value, then tech debt has to come down. So that's my view on that one.
Yeah. So the answer is it depends, but it doesn't mean necessarily automatically that if you start doing core modernization and your budget is between 2 and 10, that eventually that is going to be dropping. Because just like Zillah mentioned, the technology we are deploying today, that technology we're deploying today will be the tech legacy in 5 years, right? So this is the continuous cycle that we are on. It's a journey, as Zillah mentioned.
And I would just throw in, when we talk in the tech trends about what's next, it is about thinking about how to have that become more automated, more adaptive, more self-healing. And so, the future budget might not be about replatforming or replacement, but it might be about continuous automation, because
Yeah.
As we discussed, strategies are always going to be shifting and changing. So the technical debt will always be there as your strategy changes and your current infrastructure or code or applications or what have you are not aligned. So, I think about it as the friction between your strategy and your core technology. And the more that we can use that investment to reduce the friction toward achieving value, the better off organizations will be.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Diana. We did have a question. Surinder asks, what was the technology used to refactor that COBOL mainframe system into Java? So the technology that was used actually is called InnoWake. That was the backend system that was used, and the transition actually occurred onto AWS's GovCloud technology. So that's how that particular project unfolded with the government of Utah. So here is another interesting question. Vinod asks, is there a practical possibility of using Gen AI to automatically help with tech debt removal, specifically in the source code, in that sort of domain, what is it, domain number 3 on applications? Any sort of reflections on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So recently we started leveraging Gen AI to document the source code. There is a lot of code written, and there's nobody left to understand the code. And Gen AI was able to document entire source code and give us what is in the code. Right? This is going to help us in the modernization and capturing the rules. The second one is, you have JDK. I'm talking about Java language, old version of Java, and now you want to go to new version of Java. And Gen AI understands both old and the new, and we are leveraging Gen AI toolset to, technically it's not a migration per se, but more of a replatforming of old Java into the new Java methods. Right? Gen AI definitely can help us, and we are seeing anywhere from 30 to 40% improvement in the productivity of the developers. I'm guessing in next 6 to 9 months, we will have Gen AI enabled specialized models. Today, we have these multi-models which are very generic, but in 6 to 9 months from now, we are going to have a specialized AI models which can do the entire tech stack or tech debt, improvements, I would say, not elimination, but more, it can improve your overall processes and the code within very short time frame. So they are not far away. I'm saying, guessing in 9 to 12 months, we should see those.
I also want to emphasize too, the question I know was specifically about generative AI, but let's remember Gen AI is just one of many AI capabilities. And so AI, generating code, summarizing text are some of the new things organizations are thinking about. But, for those that are at different stages of maturity, I think a Deloitte survey shows that 60% of organizations are using AI broadly to monitor and identify issues in their code. And then about half of organizations are using it to manage their code environments. So depending on levels of maturity, we don't always need to be using the latest and greatest technologies. Sometimes there is, pretty mature technology out there that we can be thinking about using for organizations that are just getting started as well.
Yeah. This has been really, really fantastic, intriguing, interesting conversation. I'd like to give you all sort of final comments. We are coming at time. Maybe we'll do Diana, then you, Vasa, then we go to Zillah. So Diana, any sort of particular call out for action, any of your closing thoughts here?
Yeah, thanks so much. Great discussion, everyone. I think my closing shot would be everything that you do should start and end with the strategy. So hopefully Zillah can appreciate this as someone sitting in our strategy practice. But I think that, prioritizing spend, identifying challenges, as I mentioned earlier, it's about friction. So start with thinking about what your strategy is. that your business is trying to achieve, and then, therefore what your core IT infrastructure needs to do for you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Diana. Vasa, over to you.
Yeah, my final thought would be that Gen AI is going to help you in this transition into the modern, and leveraging this new tech and staying up to date on that one is going to really help drive the business, focusing on driving the business growth or revenue and cutting the cost.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vasa. Zillah, take us.
Don't try and achieve everything all in one go. Think about this as a series of steps along the way, and programmatically figure out what amount of budget and what amount of work needs to be done in order to be able to address your technology debt. Keep it as part of a consistent approach. There was a question that came in terms of how frequently do you need to be doing this? You need to refresh your strategy every year so that you keep on top of your technology debt thinking and approach, and keep it fresh.
Wonderful. In other words, move from core modernization events to core modernization workout, as the trend calls it out. Wonderful. Thank you all very much. This was fantastic. For the audience members, we have recorded the session. We'll soon post a link on our LinkedIn channel, and you'll get a link through my regular communication. Thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Have yourselves a lovely Wednesday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.